Discover the hidden truth about Adam and Eve's daughters. Imagine the scene. The Garden of Eden, an untouched paradise where Adam and Eve were the first humans created by God. The story everyone knows tells us that after the fall, they had children, like Cain, Abel, and Seth, who would go on to populate the earth. But there's a detail few people notice. What about the daughters? If Adam and Eve were the parents of all humanity, where are the women of this lineage in biblical accounts? Why do sacred texts emphasize only the male offspring? Was it an oversight? Or could the truth about Adam and Eve's daughters have been intentionally hidden over the centuries? The answer to this mystery may be concealed between the lines of the scriptures and in ancient texts that were left out of the Bible. But before we dive into these forgotten records, it's important to understand how the Bible itself might contain subtle clues about the existence of these women. What if the truth has always been right in front of us, but we never knew how to interpret it? That brings us to our next point: the hidden references in the scriptures and how certain passages may reveal more than we ever imagined. The Bible is a book full of layers. Many believe that every word was carefully chosen and that nothing is there by accident. But what if there are hidden messages? What if, through various translations and interpretations, something essential was left out? Researchers point to passages that suggest the presence of women in Adam and Eve's lineage, but these references were omitted or minimized in later versions of the scriptures. In the book of Genesis, for example, there are subtle mentions of Adam having sons and daughters, but with no names, no stories, no details that help us understand them. Isn't that strange? Why would the Bible, so rich in details about genealogies and lineages, remain silent about the women who supposedly helped populate the world? Were they deliberately erased from history? Before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, because in the next videos we'll explore even more mysteries that you won't want to miss. The answer may lie in apocryphal texts and ancient writings that were not included in the Bible as we know it today. And one of these records may hold the key to one of the greatest enigmas of creation. What was the true role of Adam and Eve's daughters in the origin of humanity? To understand this, we need to look at the historical context of the time and discover why women were systematically erased from sacred narratives. Imagine for a moment that you are at the dawn of time. Humanity is just beginning, and every new life is essential for the survival of the species. We know that Adam and Eve's sons played crucial roles, but what about the daughters? Their absence from the narratives may seem like a minor detail, but if we analyze the historical context, we realize that something much bigger is at play. Ancient societies frequently rewrote history to fit their patriarchal structures. What if these women played a fundamental role in humanity's expansion, but their contributions were deliberately erased? What's even more intriguing is that, despite having no names or stories of their own, there are indications that these daughters existed and were essential in shaping the first civilizations. Some theorists suggest that they may have been leaders, priestesses, or even figures who were later deified over time. But there's an even more puzzling question. If the first humans needed to reproduce, who did Adam and Eve's sons marry? The answer may lie in a controversial but widely discussed theory among historians and theologians: the theory of sister wives, which raises profound questions about humanity's origins. Here, we enter controversial territory, one of the most debated topics among Bible scholars and historians of antiquity. If Cain, Abel, and Seth were the first descendants of Adam and Eve, who did they marry? The most accepted explanation among theologians is that Adam and Eve's sons married their own sisters. This is because, in those early times, humanity was still in its infancy, and there was no other possible way for reproduction. But if this is true, it means that there were daughters, women who were essential for the continuation of the species but whose names were erased from history. However, this theory raises more questions than answers. If there were sister wives, why were their names erased? What was the structure of these first families? Was there a hidden reason for the silence surrounding these women? But the doubts don't stop there. Some researchers believe that the answers may be found in lost texts, ancient records that reveal details about the first women of humanity. Documents like the Book of Jasher and the Book of Jubilees may contain surprising clues about the true fate of Adam and Eve's daughters. Hey, did you already know about these facts? Drop a comment if you've heard of this before. Let's talk. The Bible we know today is just a fraction of what once existed. Throughout history, countless texts were deemed heretical or simply left out of official versions. One of these forgotten books is the Book of Jasher, a text mentioned in the Bible itself, but lost for centuries. So, what makes this book so intriguing? It contains accounts of Adam and Eve's descendants that are missing from the traditional Genesis narrative. Among these hidden passages, there's evidence suggesting that Adam and Eve's daughters not only existed, but played crucial roles in early society. Beyond the Book of Jasher, other ancient records, such as the Book of Jubilees, expand on biblical genealogies and openly mention daughters who were erased from more well-known accounts. But why were these details suppressed? What do these texts reveal that could change how we understand creation? If these women were so important, why were they silenced? To answer this question, we need to go back to the most crucial moment in history, the original sin and its impact on how women have been perceived throughout the ages. The original sin, a story that shaped history. The story of original sin is one of the most influential narratives in human history. Eve, the first woman, is depicted as the one who gave in to temptation and led Adam to disobey God. As a result, humanity was cast out of paradise and condemned to a life of suffering. But what if this story had been told differently? What if, in older or forgotten versions, Eve wasn't the only woman to bear this burden? How did this perspective shape the way Adam and Eve's daughters were treated in the generations that followed? For centuries, the idea that a woman was responsible for humanity's fall has been used to justify female submission. It's no coincidence that Adam and Eve's daughters were erased from historical records. They posed a threat to a narrative that reinforced male dominance. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. This story isn't unique to Judeo-Christian tradition. Ancient civilizations across the world tell similar tales of women who defied fate and were punished for it. This raises an even deeper question. Could Adam and Eve's daughters be connected to much older myths found in various cultures? A story bigger than the Bible. Now imagine that the biblical creation story isn't just a standalone account, but part of a much bigger puzzle. Many civilizations throughout history have strikingly similar myths about the origins of humanity, and more importantly, about women who were forgotten or silenced. For example, in ancient Sumer, there was Lilith, a woman said to have been created before Eve, only to be erased from the traditional narrative. In Egyptian mythology, some goddesses were seen as the mothers of humanity, but over time their stories were altered or diminished. What if Adam and Eve's daughters weren't just characters in a biblical story, but part of a much broader legacy? Could they have been the first priestesses, queens, or even deities whose histories were reshaped over the centuries? Archaeological discoveries that could change everything. Modern archaeology is beginning to uncover clues that might change everything we know about these early women. But what exactly do these discoveries reveal, and how could they change our understanding of history? The answers might lie in the remnants of the first human societies, where women played a much more significant role than we were led to believe. In recent years, archaeologists have made stunning discoveries that challenge the traditional view of ancient history. Among them are evidence of societies where women were central figures, far from the submissive roles depicted in religious texts. Ancient cave paintings, burial sites, and artifacts suggest that, in some early civilizations, women were spiritual leaders, rulers, and even warriors. But if this is true, why were Adam and Eve's daughters completely erased from the narrative? Some findings suggest that the earliest human societies weren't as patriarchal as later religious texts would have us believe. In certain civilizations, fertility and creation were associated with women, not men. This raises a disturbing question. Was history rewritten to erase the influence of these women? If these women truly played a central role in shaping humanity, how was their legacy erased? To answer that, we need to go back to the origins of civilization and uncover how Adam and Eve's daughters may have shaped the world in ways we never imagined. What if everything we know about the origins of humanity is incomplete? For centuries, we've believed that civilization expanded solely through Adam and Eve's sons. But does that really make sense? How could a society develop without the active participation of women? The truth is that even though they were silenced in sacred texts, Adam and Eve's daughters may have played a crucial role in spreading culture, language, and social organization. Anthropological studies indicate that in many ancient societies, women were responsible for passing down knowledge and maintaining the structure of their communities. Let's keep going, but before we do, don't forget to hit that like button. If you're enjoying this content, give it a thumbs up. But there's something even more surprising. Some theories suggest that some of these women may have founded powerful bloodlines, influencing the rise of entire nations. Could Adam and Eve's daughters have become priestesses, rulers, or even divine figures in stories that were later distorted over time? If this is true, one crucial question arises. Who were these women? Were their names forgotten, or were they deliberately erased from history? And that's exactly what we're going to explore next. The lost names of the first women. In humanity, the forgotten names of the first women. Every great story has protagonists. But what happens when those protagonists are erased from the records? If Adam and Eve's daughters were so essential to humanity's development, why did their names disappear? Some ancient sources mention mysterious names that could be linked to these forgotten women. Among them, we find Azura and Awan, names that rarely appear in mainstream texts but are referenced in apocryphal writings and rabbinic traditions as possible daughters of Adam and Eve. Are these names authentic, or are they merely fragments of a much larger story that was lost over the centuries? What's even more intriguing is that these names may have been preserved indirectly in the mythologies of other civilizations. For example, in Mesopotamian texts, there are references to female figures who played fundamental roles in humanity's origins, yet they are completely absent from Judeo-Christian tradition. This raises an even deeper question. Was it a choice to erase these women from history? Was there a deliberate effort to remove their identities? To understand this, we must examine how history has been shaped over centuries to reinforce certain narratives while excluding others. The silencing of women in religious history. Imagine a story where only half of the characters are mentioned. Sounds strange, doesn't it? Yet that's exactly what happened to women throughout religious history. Adam and Eve's daughters weren't the only female figures to be erased. Many other women who played essential roles in Judeo-Christian traditions were reduced to footnotes or forgotten entirely. But why? One possible answer lies in the evolution of monotheistic religions. In a world where male authority became the norm, the presence of influential women may have been seen as a threat. As a result, many of these figures were removed, their names and stories fading into oblivion. But what if some of these women left behind traces? What if evidence of their existence still lingers in ancient accounts, waiting to be rediscovered? If these women truly existed and held power, understanding their role could completely change our perception of human history. What this revelation means for us today. Now that we've uncovered this mystery, a bigger question emerges. What does it change? If Adam and Eve's daughters really existed and were central to humanity's development, what else might have been hidden from us? How many other stories were erased or rewritten to fit a particular version of history? This revelation isn't just about history or religion. It's an invitation to question everything we've accepted as absolute truth. History, like any narrative, is shaped by those who tell it. And now, it's up to us to decide whether we'll continue accepting the traditional version or have the courage to explore what has always been hidden. But there's one last detail, something we haven't mentioned yet. What if some of these female bloodlines not only survived, but still carry traces of their origins to this day? Could the descendants of Adam and Eve's forgotten daughters still exist? Now that, my friend, is a story for another day. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on more incredible content like this.